to evaluate that and say, is it moving fast enough to get to the place where we said we would be in 2030? So when we're at the same place on both those issues, hold states accountable, create national models, that is a very important aspect for New Mexico and for clean air, particularly for oil and gas states. You know, the difference between New Mexico and Texas isn't geology, it's just policy. And New Mexicans on the Texas border are really harmed, and I'm sure Mr. Schreiber is going to talk to you about that. He knows what it's like to have actual harm, environmental harm, because of greenhouse gases for oil and gas based on where you live. Now, he's not on the Texas side, he's on the Colorado border, but he's an expert, and he's a land steward, and he's a rancher. These are areas he knows well. Two, while those rules are shifting or completely repealed now by EPA under the new administration, it speaks to we're going to keep validating and how important it is for states like New Mexico to stay the course. Because if we don't, every state just goes backwards. And we know that the greenhouse gases, that methane, this is what creates global warming faster than any of our other carbon issues on the planet. So if you're going to make an impact, this is where you must make it. I have two more additional points. One, we have doubled production, and still these policies are working because we still maintained. I would argue that that's impossible at the, not getting it as close as we'd like. Again, we're on track, but we want to go a little bit faster. As the secretary reminded me, our 2019 effort was to create, a runway for folks. So not all of the things that you have to do to reduce your methane emissions or nearly eliminate them are done all at once, right? That we build in part of that, which, to my good friend John, can be frustrating for the environmental community, is they want them all at once. The science is clear. This is bad for you. The science is clear. It is warming the earth faster than we can manage. Again, bad for you. But we know that it's not sustainable if you don't create a runway so that the industry flip-flops back and forth and continues to advocate to states who may not work as quickly as we do, not to do anything at all. And I'm hopeful that folks like Exxon that are doing really good work in this space as an oil and gas company, it's not the same as talking about how great no carbon is in geothermal, it's different, but they are really doing leading industry standards. That means that they'll do more in their industries, we hope and believe, in other states, and maybe we can get to a place where we're not polarized on clear environmental science about climate change. That is really critical for us. Last thing that I want to point out is that we're now in the place where, they have to start implementing other standards like dealing with their diesel engines, which are huge polluters, and with our clean fuel standards and the hearings and the work there, they're in a really productive place to do more in that regard. So they have to meet standards for their engines. They have to meet standards for their tanks, which will lower, again, those methane emissions. We're trending exactly in the right direction as we should. And as they do that, it brings more than 1,500 jobs in construction, and it brings a number of jobs in just doing that clean fuels blending so that we're getting the right biodiesel fuels where we need them in all of those industries. And then I fibbed a bit. The last thing that's as important to me about leading in the country, meeting national standards and working to get everybody else to do them, being validated by one of the most respected environmental organizations in the United States and beyond. But I've got kiddos with asthma still. Now, we're seeing those rates greatly reduced, but until no kid, no family has a public health issue because of oil and gas, it's a problem. And I know that it still sounds in that regard like an oxymoron. It isn't. This is a state that will have the cleanest barrel of oil based on our standards and the cleanest liter of natural gas. And the reason that that's important is that you have other climate crisis, right? They're responding to the crisis, like Japan, who can't get there. They can't get there without a transition. They're going to go to natural gas. They're going to go to states like ours who can meet their industry standards to tackle the climate crisis. And John, I don't know if you know this, but if Japan used our natural gas, same Mr. Schreiber, they can reduce their carbon emissions by just that standard by 40%. Right? So we're making a difference around the globe, and we want to do it as effectively as we can. We want to move it across the country. And I know it needs to be faster. We're doing as much as we can with the industry, but we appreciate that you keep pushing industry standards that are better than they are anywhere else.
Thank you, Governor.
You're welcome.
John, we'll go to you next
Sure.
for some remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you, Governor. No one has pushed longer and harder on this issue than you, and we so appreciate
Are you
your
all
leadership.
right?
Am I not well?
We're supposed to argue, and I want viewers, I used the wrong word, and then I want to interrupt you. I just did this at Notre Dame. We're supposed to debate these issues. You get the best of all of us. What does the science mean? What does it do? And I've worked with John for a number of years. Nobody pushes harder than he does in this organization, and that can be uncomfortable. And that's why I teased him just a bit, because he has to be in that space. That's his job. But when we're together, it shows that we're working on behalf of every New Mexican and every American and everyone who needs this planet to do better in this regard. So I meant it as a compliment.
I know, and I took it as such.
Okay, good.
Yeah, thank you, Governor. So we're very happy to be able to share this data today that shows, it's from MethaneSat, a satellite that we launched about 1.5 years ago. And it shows the fruits of the labor that the state has been doing since the very beginning of the Lujan Grisham administration. Secretary Kenny mentioned, one of your first actions as governor was to sign that executive order that got this ball rolling. And today we were able to show what the results of that are, and the results are striking. It's the clearest evidence yet that regulations are working, that the state's efforts to put sensible requirements in place to limit methane emissions from oil and gas development are having a marked impact on pollution in the state and also the waste of natural gas resources. And to put some dollars around that, every year, because of these efforts, the state is capturing about $125 million additional natural gas. And that is ringing the cash register for the state's taxpayers and for its royalty revenue to the tune of about $27 million a year. So significant dollars are flowing into Mexico, staying in New Mexico, as a result of the stewardship efforts that the Secretary and the Governor have led on. That's enough gas, to put it another way, to serve every residential consumer in New Mexico annually. So that's, I think, a pretty remarkable thing when folks are really concerned right now about energy prices. Your efforts are capturing that gas and helping with affordability here in New Mexico. Obviously, the state's efforts are very important right now with what's going on in Washington. As the Governor mentioned, there's full retreat in Washington on these sorts of requirements. And while Washington retreats, the state of New Mexico is moving forward. And I think that is incredibly important. These requirements are cost effective, and they lead to cleaner air, a safer climate, and economic benefits and revenue to the state of New Mexico, not to mention jobs in the methane mitigation industry. And Don can speak to this. He's seen it up in Farmington, where the companies that help manufacture the equipment that then gets installed on these sites, the inspectors that go out and inspect these sites, these are folks close to the ground. These are folks in Farmington, in Carlsbad, in Hobbs, that are benefited from the state's efforts. And also, as the Governor mentioned, it's going to help New Mexico's energy products be more competitive in international markets. The United States isn't an island. Despite efforts in Washington to roll back requirements, international markets in the EU and in Asia are moving towards requiring that the energy they import is as clean as it can be. And this data is going to help New Mexico make that case. Also, as the governor mentioned, I'm one to, and you are too, not to rest on your laurels. To keep moving
I wasn't
forward.
sure where that was going.
And so, as good as this is, as good as the low methane intensity that New Mexico has achieved with these rules is, there's an opportunity to continue to push that forward. And the industry itself has set a 0.2% methane intensity goal, the leaders in the industry have. And I see no reason that New Mexico can't help them achieve that by continuing to move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think as we get ready to go to Don here, it's really important to also note that setting these rules in place, now that we've had them in place for 4 years, also means we've ramped up our validation in the field. And we've done that through inspections, we've done that through using remote and real-time monitoring, working with EDF. We've done that by using helicopters flying over the sites to look for these leaks. So it's not a matter of just doing what we did and pushing out the best rules that serve as a national model. It's a matter of validating that those rules are actually working by taking strong enforcement cases and holding polluters accountable for when they do work outside of the lens that everybody else is working on. And I think one way in which I met Don Schreiber back when I was with US EPA, before I took this role, was over the exact question of enforcement. But as we turn to you, Don, also affectionately known as the Methane Madman, feel free to share your experience here and what this means to you with the EDF announcement.
Well, Mr. Secretary, Governor, John, and all of you here today, my name is Don Schreiber. I'm not sure everyone will recognize me without my hat on. But, I'm from the San Juan Basin, New Mexico's other oil field, where for so many years we felt trapped in fossil fuel waste, including methane, and we thought it would never change. Yet, here we are today, and things have changed. The New Mexico oil and gas industry is enjoying record production and profits, but the reason that we don't feel trapped, like our neighbors in Texas, is because we have a governor that believes in science. We have a governor that understands that regulations are part of a working democracy. And we have a governor with a good heart.
I'm going to invite you to every single one of these.
I'm not finished.
We'll cut them off here.
We have a governor with a good heart. She cares about our children and grandchildren and their future, and she cares about frontline families like ours right now. Frontline communities who, without her leadership and without these regulations, would still be trapped. So, thank you, Governor.
Oh, starting to get nostalgic. I'm just starting to like this job. I've always loved this job.
And I want to thank the Environmental Defense Fund as well for their investment in the technology that allows us the validation that the Secretary is talking about, and allows us to know for sure now. Now we know. We have driven methane intensity down in the state of New Mexico to 1.2%. And John, we want that technology to keep tracking our progress as we drive towards that goal of 0.02%. So
right.
thank you, EDF. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Don.
What a great state.
And as we're closing, and you might have some more facts, and then we'll go to questions. One other issue that I think plagues us to get to good policy around the country is that too many advocacy organizations don't go to the science, right? Unless the ultimate goal is we should be through our transition. If we've been doing this work from the 60s and 70s, we'd be there. You'd have a different economy, you'd have different energy. New Mexico would be powering the entire United States with just geothermal, zero carbon. That's not what happened. But a lot of advocacy organizations, because they're so frustrated that we aren't moving the needles in the ways that we should and arguably should have been doing all along, that it's just sort of to get people to be, don't lose your anger and intensity. That doesn't solve these problems. What EDF is doing and so many others are doing is they're leaning in and paying for the science. That creates a whole different space to push productively policymakers, states and the feds, to go to rulemaking and go to the things that they can really make a difference and then to validate it. That's a game changer in all of these productive, independent relationships, where again, we may not always agree on the exact strategy or the timing, but this is some of the most valuable work that the country can lean into with EDF. And I didn't quite make that point, I don't think, and it needs to be said, because it's why people are stalling all across the country. And it's one of the reasons New Mexico continues to be able to lean in. So I want to thank EDF and others for doing exactly that work today and every day.
Yeah, Governor, well said, and that is exactly how we're going to close that last 9% gap to get to our 2030 climate goal. We're well on our way, but this partnership, this ability to work together to develop the science, to work with regulators, to then implement what we're learning and show that there is not a lack of leadership around climate in the United States. It's actually happening in the states. And that's exactly what we've been doing now since 2019, irrespective of what happens federally. So I'm glad to be part of this, and thank you all for your remarks. And with that, Governor, I think we can open to some questions. Michael, are you going to help here? Thank you.
So, broke up.
I have one for John and then one for the governor here.
Gotcha.
John, methane sat went dark, right, 2 months ago. Is it still dark, or do you want to fix it? What's going on there?
So it is unfortunately, it is no longer operational. But this data was collected before that happened. And so this is, there's still about a year's worth of data that we're combing through and finding findings like this. And we'll be sharing those, but unfortunately, no, that satellite's no longer operational.
And so you're not able to collect further data moving forward?
Not from MethaneSat, but it's one of a growing sort of constellation of satellites. So there was one launched by the Japanese a few weeks ago called GOSAT-GW. There are carbon mapper satellites, there are GHG-SAT satellites, and others that are still helping provide more information.
Thank you. And then, Governor Kennedy, I just had a question for you. I'm so sorry, I wrote it down on my phone like a millennial. She highlighted, so I noted that you highlighted Exxon as its leading industry standards, but I would also point out that Exxon is currently working with the Trump administration to strong arm Europe in dropping its climate goals and buying U.S. natural gas. I just want to know how you square with how this helps the climate.
Well, I do, because they're doing it here, so we can unequivocally defend that they can and will do it if somebody asks them. I don't know what to say about folks who, in my opinion, give in a number of ways. Free speech issues, law firms, academia, and determining that it's easier to do that and find another way around than it is to say unequivocally, which New Mexico says in many administrations and in many federal administrations, we disagree with you, and we're going to try not to do it the federal way, because it's not good for New Mexico unless you get a federal law that we have to adhere to. And even then, we looked at ways to do those adherences that mitigate any damage to New Mexicans, like Medicaid stuff. I can't fix those cuts at the federal level, but I can do it from the state, which is why we'll do a special session. So I don't love that by any of these industries. I'm disappointed as an American I'm disappointed that we have a federal government that feels like it can strong arm you into a different position, but I'm gonna keep doing the opposite, which is highlighting they shouldn't be doing that, because clearly they can achieve a different goal here, and they should. I think that they are, I'll give you another good example though, I think they're feeling like they can't convince the White House that climate change is real. I think he really I believe that the President of the United States, none of the folks around him, but I believe that he doesn't think that climate change is real. I have come to the conclusion with a lot of anecdotal stuff, so it's not a satellite image. So you just have to take my emotional reaction. I think he really believes it. And if you've got someone that inherently isn't gonna fundamentally change their opinion no matter what the science says, then you say, sure, we'll do that. But you know, countries are coming to New Mexico anyway. And that's where states can be the innovators, because if you are a company doing business in the state, I don't care what you've said to the feds. If we have a contract set of negotiations here, we either just exclude you or you gotta do it with us here. So maybe more states will follow those kind of state leads. It's really disappointing. And that for me comes on the heels of what happened with our late night TV shows. And so I'm feeling a bit raw about folks just caving to the will of the White House. And I don't have a good ready statement except that I believe New Mexico won't be one of those places that can be strong-armed to do the wrong thing for the people that we serve.
You did say the magic word special session, and I do have one question about that, but I can let everyone
Okay.
else know and ask it at the end if necessary.
Dan Boyd?
Good to see everybody. I wanted to, obviously, there's some environmental groups who don't believe the state has done enough to address emissions and pollution, things like that. The state has faced litigation on those issues, so wanted to kind of get your response to, you know, those groups who maybe think some of these efforts hasn't been enough when it comes to.
I'm going to be a little harsh on one side. Some of the groups, as I mentioned before, don't always go to the science. If you have oil and gas at all operating your state, you haven't done enough. And again, I'm more pragmatic. I don't want perfect. That would be perfect for the globe. I don't know how we turn the lights on, but that would be perfect for the globe, but it can't be the enemy of the good. And they should do what they're entitled to do, and they are. And we'll see where a lot of that litigation goes. But what I would say to them is, again, more is coming. So it's not like we're done. This isn't an announcement that this is good enough. So to EDF and to Don Schreiber, this is good enough. We've shown that we can be twice as good as Texas. That's good enough. It isn't. What's good enough is getting to our standard or better. And now these pneumatic valves, dealing with the engines. And again, it's also, you know, what they waste when they waste methane. These leaks are also additional money, as you've heard, plus companies that do methane detection, plus equipment and infrastructure that they have to invest is also in the hundreds of millions that can come back to the state. So we're incentivized. And because we're doing it this way, and again, I firmly believe that Mexicans are going to want today a Democratic governor and more Democratic leaders, but these runways create opportunity for them. And if, for some reason, that didn't occur, they're in place and the policymakers downstairs know that they can happen. So I think it creates stability, and that's what I would say to the folks who are still frustrated. This is the kind of stability that moves the needle faster for the country. And we don't get sued. Someone's going to sue us on either side of this equation. So if it's not the environmental folks, and again, I'm not angry at them, hope that doesn't come across like that at all. But then the industry sues you. And then you're in litigation forever, and what you get is you get a court decision that until the litigation is done, none of this is enforceable. Well, see, we're doing it while we ask harder questions. I think that's a much preferred method, and I'm grateful that our partners largely are following suit there.
And to that
Yeah.
point, the Independent Petroleum Association of New Mexico actually did take the state to court over the rules that were passed by the Environment Department and lost at the Court of Appeals. So, yeah,
Yeah,
it's.
as case in
both
point,
sides.
they will sue you. Everyone, I mean, again, damn you guys, everyone sues us.
And Dan, I would just add to your question that the luxury of being where we are now in the administration and having been here since the beginning with the governor is when I look back at the lost opportunities, when we looked for perfect at every legislative session as opposed to making incremental changes, we could have had 6 years plus of incremental climate changes.
And we'd be further along.
Yeah, and we're not there now. So sometimes I think we have to, and as somebody who's been in this field now for my entire career, do I personally want change faster? Absolutely. But the reality is we need a big tent with a lot of voices. And sometimes those voices, when they make the climate emissions not the problem, but the people the problem, we get nothing done. So if we stay focused on climate emissions and we focus on incremental change, we might not have 9% to close, we might be beating 9% by now.
And I actually gave a speech to Secretary Kenny's colleagues from around the nation. It was great, a few weeks ago, and pointed out that we have to have more courage because people won't do even these rules because you get sued. There's environmental policy is just a series of lawsuits. It's like water policy. It's why the state engineer's office is, I'm going to make this up to give an example so these percentages aren't accurate. 10% policy, 90% lawyers, right? It's weighted heavier in the litigation aspects than it is in the science and the policy that you could be undertaking for a state that needs more water. So we need to litigate less, but there is a role, but we need courage to set standards so that you can get some results. And we think we've done all of those things as well as you can, and we hope other states will follow our lead.
I just realized we have all Dans and Dannies with us.
Mike, may I
Yeah.
just add, Dan, historically, talking about the arc of environmental justice, talking about the big arc. The answer is, historically, is we don't usually solve these pressing environmental problems in our lifetime. That's usually the answer. And it was less than 25 years ago that I came to our ranch and they were pouring liquid oil field waste on the ground, flaring the wells. Not even flaring, but just venting them when they drilled them, and it sounded like a jet engine. For us to be here today, and I don't want anybody to make jokes about how long my lifetime is going to be from this point forward, but I just want to say that the progress is remarkable. Is it enough? No. Are we here working together as a team? Do we have to stay together to solve it? Yes.
Thank you. Dan Chacon.
Secretary, can you elaborate on the enforcement piece? How are we ensuring that these rules are being followed?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dan. So we are doing a number of things, and sitting to your right is our Compliance and Enforcement Director, former General Counsel Bruce Basil. But we're doing a few things where our rule that we wrote allows for credible evidence. So any New Mexican can provide us with information that can begin an investigation. So that's sort of eyes on the ground, and we hear from communities all the time, and we go out and respond to those. In addition to that, we're using satellite data to also look for super emitters, and we send them a little note that says, you need to tell us why this is not a violation of the law. And you have so many hours to get us a response, or else the next thing you might hear from us is a notice of civil penalty, and we may initiate a lawsuit. Those sort of using the conventional technologies or the convention of people and the innovation of satellite data coming together, those are some areas that we're looking at, or we've been doing. In addition to that, we're starting to use AI to do some predictive analytics as to who might be violating the law. That's something that we're moving into at this point. It's been proven out by a University of Chicago professor that you can do that for hazardous waste regulations, and we're starting to look at that now for air quality issues. So that's another area we're moving towards. And let's look at it this way. When we find violations, we're not the state that issues a slap on the wrist $500, $5,000 penalty. And in fact, anecdotally, I won't name the states, but when I was sitting with my colleagues around the country, and I said that we issued, you know, $24, $42 million penalties to companies for violating the law, they said things to me like, I would lose my job if I did that. And I said, I have a governor who
Lose
says
your
that.
job if you don't.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the notion that you can come to New Mexico, like doing business here is an honor. It really is. In order to get a drilling, remember there's a three-step process. You have to get a lease from the state land commissioner. You have to get a drilling permit from the Oil Conservation Division. And then the Environment Department comes in and makes sure that all the air quality requirements are being met. So by the time you get to us, you've already sort of gone through the process, and in order to enjoy that right to be in New Mexico and working on oil and gas issues, you have to maintain compliance. And last thing I'll just say, note that the Environment Department, I think it was last year, was general fund neutral. In other words, we collect enough penalties to have an 18% return on the appropriation we got from the legislature. It's not that, I should say, it's companies, we need a check and balance. You cannot just write rules and claim you're done. If you're not figuring out ways to enforce them or to validate and enforce them, then you're missing the really big emitters. And so, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I add, Mr. Secretary?
Yeah.
I would like to step into the role of being the validator for Secretary Kenny in two ways. One, we see oil field violations and take the film and call the department, just cold call MED. It's really easy and we get results from that. And I would
do that
encourage. Okay, so the governor and I are doing that. But that's
Why is there flaring on this?
Well,
Yeah, I call.
Exactly. So you don't have to be an expert or a governor to call in. And to your readers, to who's seeing us and listening to us today, I would like to validate what Secretary Kenny says. We can all make this state better, and we should take it as a personal responsibility to help hold this industry accountable. Secondly, speaking of slap on the wrists and fines, I would just like to say, I began working with Jim before he was the Secretary of Energy, and again about us, yes, Secretary of the Environment, sorry. I wanted to say that, you know, we achieved, it took, how long, 6 years? Yeah. But a over $9 million fine for environmental violations of an oil company right here in New Mexico. I don't mean just Gemini, but I started that action, and then through his follow-up from the feds and again down to the state with him as Secretary of the Environment, we find, this was last year,
Yep.
$9.3 million?
Yeah.
No, $9.3 million. So I think they mean business.
Yeah. And last thing I'll say, huge shout out to the men and women of the Environment Department, because they have such conviction and have such ability to do their job that they take that mission so personal and they implement it so professionally. And that is just an amazing group of people that can get it done. Because they're, you know, you have DC firms coming to New Mexico to litigate with us against our state lawyers, and they, $9 million, $24.5 million. I mean, they're doing it.
Secretary Kenny, just to follow up on the enforcement question, last year in 2024, you said like the State Environment Department and EPA found that an estimated 60% of oil and gas companies in the Permian Basin were violating air quality rules. Has that changed in the intervening year?
So keep in mind, Danny, so the numbers are roughly the same, but keep in mind that in the question that what we did was we used our satellite data to figure out which ones were violating, or let me say it this way, we used our satellite data to figure out which ones had emissions that were of concern. And then we went out in the field. So of that subset of those that had emission problems, we validated that 60% of those emissions were illegal. So we had a population of emissions, 40% of those emissions were illegal, more or less. So that's not a representative number of the entire industry.
It's not 60% of the industry, it's 60% of the emissions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the most recent
It's
data,
usually 1 or 2.
the most recent data that I just saw about a week ago or thereabouts is around the same number. We didn't do as many inspections over the last year because we reorganized to a more compliance and enforcement division. But again, we're out there, eyes in the sky, eyes on the ground, checking, and I think the industry is just generally doing better. And remember, our rules require more now than they did 4 years ago, so the emissions are still coming down. That is not a free pass for anybody out there to rest on their laurels from the oil and gas sector and think that we're not going to continue to look.
And Secretary, sorry, Governor, have you heard anything from leadership about the compacts, the medical compacts? and
We
such?
briefed them that, I want the compacts. I proposed them on the very front end. There is a, growing call in the state and frankly across the country that everybody needs these. All states have shortages. And making the standards the same, making these license reciprocity aspects and more of a universal application really can make a difference. It doesn't always make a difference, but it really can. But that's now the standard. We wanted 10 or so different practitioners would be covered. We got a hard no from the Democratic leadership. I think they want to do a body of, and I'm going to defend them and make it clear, I want them. I'm disappointed. Their position and perspective is we can get a lot more done in a 30-day doing more than just the compacts. So there will definitely be bills introduced for Med-Mal. There will definitely be compacts. There'll be a variety of those. There will be recruitment and retention efforts. There will be, and other things. They like to do that all in a package. That's sort of the way they do things. And this could eliminate, maybe you hold the compact strategically until you get some of the other stuff as a result, right? It's policymakers making sausage, getting it all upstairs. And that's what I'm gonna want too. I'm gonna want all these bills upstairs. I still think they should take a stab here, but I agree that I would not put it on unless the Democratic leadership, that's where the votes are. And I know the Republicans are anxious, disappointed, and some of them a bit angry about this. But they don't have the votes. If they can show me a path where they can get something on the floor and they can get Democratic votes, well, that maybe that would entertain a different response. I don't see a path. So that's why we're going to the Democratic leadership. They have the ability to get stuff into the caucuses and on the floors, and away we go. It's a different process. So I have a week to keep pushing. Expect that I will. Today, it's not on there. It's all budget issues. I still have a line to get competency, to get that fix done. There's been a little movement where some folks are saying you don't need that right away. I disagree. So I'm working with the courts and others, so I'm more optimistic that that gets on. I'm not having as much success on danger to self, but I haven't given up on that either. Those two, from a public safety standpoint, are critical, and the notion that we would wait another 4 or 5 months is untenable, and then have to wait for the balance of the year. I don't know how we survive, because it has a direct impact on our growing unhoused population and the intersection of public safety. It's outrageous. More than 30,000 cases have been dismissed in the state. It's just wrong. So that's where we are, but you will see a lot of the Medicaid work will get done. I mean, that's really the backbone of this. I'm looking to protect New Mexicans. The competency protects us in public safety, danger self protects us, but we can see, because we're sicker than most and have a much higher Medicaid population, that our insurance rates in the private sector are going way up. We need to address that. I need to do everything in my power to make sure that we stabilize healthcare coverage for New Mexicans and food security. We're working on some of that. That's really the underpinning of we gotta have a special session, because those changes happen in October. There's no waiting. People lose coverage, lose food, lose benefits, lose support in October. So, fingers crossed, but that's basically where we are with a week out.
Can I just piggyback
Yeah.
maybe on Danny's
Yeah.
question? And is there any concern, that the feds release the rules for this rural health fund?
Yes.
And that the compacts are.
That should be helping us. You gotta do it, even if, and I wanna be careful, I want all of it. I mean, the House has readily passed many of these compacts. Pass all those again, start there. We need to move the Senate there. I worry that there are so many trial lawyer leaders in the Senate that it gets caught there. And I understand that they're gonna tell you, they're not wrong, that their perspective is more on patient safety. But if you have no doctors here and nobody can get in, I don't see how you make the argument that you're leaning in for patient safety. And let's say they're gonna do it even, Steven, they aren't, but let's just say the feds are. We're gonna give up $1 billion for healthcare investment here? $1 billion? Really? Because you won't move it on a policy that our Democrats in the House have already stated unequivocally they care about? Makes no sense to me. So yes, we're gonna push that issue, and yes, the leadership is all aware that we received notice about that and we provided it. So I'm gonna keep pushing, and frankly, at this point, fingers crossed. I mean, legislators now be a bit, there's the executive branch and the legislative branch. Legislators don't like it when governors do executive orders, but without it, I wouldn't be this far, and I wouldn't have a statute, and I wouldn't have rules. They don't like special sessions either. Without special sessions, we lose ground more often than not, and real emergencies don't get addressed. We have a set of real emergencies that need to be addressed, so, maybe you all can persuade them, assuming I have persuaded you.
We'll get one more Dennis to come, and then we gotta go.
Last week, Republican leaders wrote you a letter saying that they haven't seen any of the proposals, and I'm wondering when those will be available, either to them or to the public.
Yeah, we should probably, literally just got those out of Legislative Council. This will surprise some of you. It's a fair point. We try to get everyone to agree on the proposal so that I don't send something out to the minority and then I have to send something out again. Because the Democratic leadership, who again, they're the majority, that's why you want to be in the majority. They get to sort of decide, fair or unfair. Then I have to then update everybody again. But I'm actually with the Republicans here. We're getting awfully close. They need to get their caucuses together, so it's imminent. And just a shout out to them, they're not wrong, that it's time for them to see everything. It is.
See, we're disagreeing better. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
And congratulations to EDF and the state and the environmental
Congratulations
department,
to you.
and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Governor.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,